So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Peter Fischer. I'm the German ambassador. I'm here with Professor Marjas Toria of Ilia State University. We are going to speak a little bit about memory culture, memory politics, based on the example of the German settlers in Georgia. Before we start, let me just say a few brief words about Professor Marjas. As I mentioned, he is the director of the Memory Studies Center in the Caucasus at Ilia State University. He has been a researcher and visiting professor in many international universities, including in Germany and the USA, and we have something important in common, which may be a theme from this Europe Day too. We are both alumni of the German Academic Exchange Service, DAAD, as are some other people in this country, and we are both former Fulbright scholars. I think you still are. I had a Fulbright scholarship to the USA. So the broader theme is memory studies, memory, history, and the discourse about it. I think you will believe me if I say that this is a very central subject in Germany. So what do we know about our history? How do we think about it? How do we talk about it? How do we deal with it today? And what we know and how we deal with it shapes our future. And as I mentioned, for Germany, obviously it's central to know about the crimes committed by Germans, to know about the Nazi era, to know about the Holocaust. It's a challenge for us because more and more young people don't know enough. We call it Vergangenheitsbewältigung, dealing with the past. And just a small anecdote, I think it was 2023 at the International Tourism Fair in Berlin, which is the biggest tourism fair in the whole world. Georgia was the main country and had the central stand. And your former prime minister came there with half the cabinet, and you had a beautiful stand, and you served great Georgian food. And the prime minister gave a speech on the opening night. And he went to the Golden Fleece and King Tamar and how Georgia defended itself and maintained its national identity and unity throughout the centuries and the millennia. And a Georgian lady came that I happened to know, and I said, "Hey, nice speech by your prime minister." She said, "I don't think so." I was taken aback, and I said, "Why not?" She said, "About King Tamar I learned in school. From the prime minister I want to hear about the future." So what we know, how we talk, how we think about the past shapes our future. And we want to talk about that a little bit based on the example of the German settlers in Georgia. They came at the beginning of the 19th century. They came mainly from the southwest of Germany, so-called region that we call Swabia or Schwaben in Germany. They came because they hit economic hard times in Germany. There were some bad harvests. There was even hunger in some of their regions. Also, some of them were so-called pietists, kind of a Lutheran denomination. So they were they thought we have to go somewhere else to really find our fulfillment in a religious way. And they were invited by the Russian Empire. The Tsar Katarina signed an edict at the end of the 18th century, inviting settlers to go to remote regions of the Russian Empire to settle and to fortify and do business. They came, they had a hard time. A fair share of them died on the trip. It was a long trip, of course, by horse carriage and then by ship from Odessa. And at the beginning it was very difficult for them. I'm sure you all know the names of the towns. Where's the first one? It gave them German names. The first one was Marienfeld. Today it's called Satichala. But then we're here in Tbilisi, in the area which is now Didube, in Bolnisi, in Asureti, and close to the river Yori. And they started, at first they had difficult economic times, but they started making wine successfully. They brought making wine barrels from wood here. They made horse carriages, and they brewed beer, and they were good farmers too. So they became a successful community. And at the peak, they were just over 20,000 people, which at that time was, my math is so bad, it was not insignificant. It was 1% of or 2% of the Georgian population, something in that area. So it was an important community, and you can still see the towns now there. You can see the German architectural style. Unfortunately, they're all falling apart pretty much. You can learn about them. We have an exhibition right next door here. You can see some more. And in 1942, was it? 42? They all had to go. And Professor Marjas will tell us a little bit about that, please.
Thank you, Ambassador Fisher. I'm really glad to join you with this conversation. It's, as you mentioned, the history is not just some objective reality which can be restored as it happened, but it's pretty much about memory and representation of the past. And it therefore concerns about present, not about just going to past and bringing some knowledge about the historical events. This particular case about deportation of German population, kind of halting around century long existence in Georgian territory, and they were pretty much integrated, adapted, brought their own culture, but also their culture were embedded into the tapestry of the South Caucasus, the Georgia, and not only Marienfeld, but also Tbilisi, of course, one of the focal point of their settlement, and kind of adding to the already well-known cultural landscape of Tbilisi as a multicultural realm. So this disappearance of German settlers was not a sudden, of course, process. It was kind of continuation. Of course, the fact itself happened quite quickly, but we should dig into the the history of Soviet terror, because after the forced inclusion of Georgia by Red Army into Soviet state, and then it was transferred to Soviet Union when Georgia was occupied, of course, new country should have been built. And this new country, supposedly Marxist international West space, became suddenly focused and centered on ethnic terror, kind of nationality terror, kind of targeting communities based on their ethnicity. And the German case is one of the most illustrious. Already in 1930s, during Stalin's Great Terror, the Soviet regime carried what were so-called national operations, kind of targeting ethnic populations. So some scholars kind of distinguish two logics in this. One was security dilemma. You know, the Soviet Union, sometimes we like to present Soviet Union as some homogeneous, fixed entity, like always existed as a powerful, repressive, empire. But Soviet Union was also history in the making. It was the country which was shaped and which was kind of challenged by, geopolitical situation. And that's why the security dilemma, security concerns were very important for Soviet leadership. And of course, they wanted to target those ethnic population who were supposed, or ethnic diasporas, if you want to use the modern term. They wanted to target the population who they thought may collaborate with their home country, and in this case, Germany, for instance. Of course, Soviets targeted many other nationalities like Greeks and other people like Iranians and etc. But this so-called almost ethnicization of enemy became the key part of the repertoire of how to deal with the diversity. And of course, as war started, and Germans were not only successful in the Tsarist time, but they became very important part of the early Soviet society, like a collective farms, like kolkhoz, as we know, and the head of this collective farms were quite successful, like producing and kind of meeting with the requirement of the state, kind of. But that did not help them. After the war started, Beria and of course Stalin and NKVD as an institution, first and foremost, kind of decided to relocate German settlers, which created a very important heritage already in Georgian cultural landscape. So, and then of course it happened like bureaucratically, really in a sophisticated way, like a structurally organized trains were brought, of course, in ready, and party cadres, not only NKVD, but all party apparatus were involved in this preparation of this mass relocation. And what I would like to conclude in this block of our conversation is that it was not just security dilemma, it was also kind of part of the Soviet nationality policy and sort of engineering new social human being, new Soviet human, kind of demographic engineering. And it reminds me the concept of biopolitics, which was brought by Michel Foucault, that they targeted community not only individuals were targeted by the Red Terror, but also the whole community as a one body, and relocated as a one body. And of course, the tragedy of this forced relocation were felt immensely, and this the legacy still haunts the so-called societies with so-called difficult past, including Germany and former Soviet states, of course. I wanted to say that this relocation changed whole social fabric, whole cultural texture of the very important landscape of Georgian multinational, multicultural environment.
Yeah, thank you. So we'll come back a little bit to the the German architecture that still exists here. And if you don't know, you may be surprised how much of the grand boulevards of Tbilisi are full of buildings constructed by German architects. And then we'll have some reflections on memory politics. So one that doesn't exist anymore is the church Peter and Paul, and it's named after myself and Pavel Herczynski. Well, it can't be because it was well before our time, but Peter and Paul. It was a German Protestant or Lutheran church built in, when was it built? In 1897 it was inaugurated, and it doesn't exist anymore. It stood at the corner of Akhmashenebeli Avenue and Marjanashvili. Nothing is left. There's just a little placard to remind, because it was in 1946, 1947, the Soviets said it needs to be dismantled. There's also cultural politics, destroying churches. And it was dismantled by German prisoners of war. They had to do the work. There were several tens of thousands of German prisoners of war who were imprisoned here. Most of them died here. Every year we go to some of the cemeteries, and I always think that none of them imagined that they would be breathing their last breath here, far away from home. They didn't fight here. They were brought here from other theaters of war. I think you'll come back to Ahmaşenebeli, to some of the significant buildings. When I came here in 2022, a TV station came and said, "Oh, we want to do like, what does an ambassador do? And we will film you walking down Rustaveli Avenue and explaining the German architecture." I said, "Oh, well, I'll be delighted, but quickly somebody bring me a book, I have to learn about it." And just on Rustaveli, on Freedom Square, there's the old Sacrebulo, German architect. Then there's what's now the Youth Palace, so the former Viceroy Palace, German architect. Even the little church across from Parliament, I'm forgetting the name right now, Kashveti Church, German architect. Across the street, school number 1, German architect. You're shaking your head, but I think it's true. The National Gallery, German architect. The Opera, German architect. So a significant part of the big, prominent buildings are from German architects. And Ahmaşenebeli is the same, with some very, very interesting buildings.
Yes, this is what Ambassador already mentioned. The erasing the memory was one of the key parts of or social or political mechanism of memory politics generally. Kind of covering the rich heritage of cultural life of Tbilisi. And this is important to note, that architecture somehow, unfortunately we are happy in Georgia that we have still buildings, you already singled out many of them as clear examples of this rich past, this complex and multicultural, multi-perspective past, as if you would like to note on that. And for me, as you asked, what is my favorite place? And by the way, I'm coming from Abkhazia, and in Abkhazia there were also 3 German settlements during the first appearance of German settlers. But if you go to the Ahmaşenebeli, this is just not to mention single building, but the whole the avenue bears the imprint of the German architecture, and it was especially important for Georgians also, and I wanted to connect this issue with imperial peripherality and how imperial rule sometimes, mostly, but sometimes it's a kind of pressures to confine your imagination. I mean the Georgians' imagination about Europeanness, which is not, which we did not start like 10 years ago in Georgia, but it started in the 19th century when Georgian cultural figures, founder fathers or mothers of Georgian nationalism, created this imagined Georgian society. They imagined Georgia as a part of the Europe. So they already had this clear dichotomy between Europe and Russia, starting from that time. Even though they were part of the Russian Empire, and imagining the political body as a state was really difficult. But Georgia was kind of on time with this reviving of cultural nationalism, and the part of this cultural nationalism was imagine Georgia as a Europe. And after the Sovietization of Georgia, this Ahmaşenebeli Avenue kind of kept this memory about Georgia's rich culture and German heritage. And in the beginning of early 90s, for instance, I, as a student, not early, late 90s, I'm not so old. Late 90s, I was a student also strolling down to the Armashinebeli Avenue. I was also thinking that our culture and our history is not just Soviet history, it's a much larger and much embedded in more broader context, which is organically connected to the Europe. And what German settlers brought as an example of Armashinebeli Avenue now is the layered architectural and cultural reality, like Neutiflis, right? Former Neutiflis as a part of this the German settlements, and like buildings with high attics, deep cellars, and orderly special organization. But what is important, it was not just imposing German architecture, but kind of having this architecture exchanges also, because Germans also took something from local style, and that created some kind of rich, mutually exchanging language of cultural, if you would like to call flow or exchange or trans-regional or trans-cultural identity, if you would like to say that. And architecture kind of reflects this, like a Tbilisi house, sort of Tbilisi house, reflects both this European, German, and local Tbilisi style. So this is what I wanted to exemplify, because Soviets wanted to say, kind of impose the idea that Georgia is part of this only Soviet world, and we kind of were created or emerged in like 3,000 years ago, but still going towards Soviet Union. They did not have a contact with outer world, like in Europe, for instance. So that historical imaginary kind of confined Georgia's social representation or historical representation. And what we are trying now currently, dealing with this European integration issues, also called the historical propaganda, which we be kind of focus later on, it's about going back to our historical and cultural imaginary and rethink our place within Europe again.
So I think our time is up, right? To conclude, I think that wraps it up very nicely. We tried to show you this, the link to Germany as one European country through its architecture is strong, very strong, visible still today. If you go to the German embassy's social media, every week or so we introduce a new building by our various colleagues. And when I came here from United Arab Emirates. Great place, not European. I came here, I felt this is European. And one of the reasons that I could feel this is because I learned about the depth, the age and the depth and the broadness of our connection, which spreads well beyond architecture, in music, in philosophy, in legal studies, in business. So Georgia is Europe. Europe loves Georgia. You're invited to join our union. The way there is clear. Everything is written down. I like to say Georgia can do whatever it wants. Nobody has to join the European Union, but you can join, and you should. We'll be delighted if you do join. You can't do whatever you want and join. That's not the way it works. Memory politics, very important to unearth, discuss openly, and really put on the table everything about the history. You have to do that. That's our experience as Germans, with all the weight, the terrible weight of our history, to chart a good course into the future. And you need specialists like the professor to do this research, and we shouldn't close their faculties. Go ahead, final word for you.
Yeah, if I may, I wanted to emphasize the condition of historical studies in Georgia, especially. I represent Ilia State University today, which is kind of in a difficult situation. And as you know, in the framework of this announced reform, many programs are going to effectively halted, like around 92% of programs will be stopped, and including the program of modern history, which I represent today along with the Memory Studies Center and generally History Department at Ilia State University. And this program was an important initiative which brought together and brings together Georgian and international scholars, historians, really important names in the field, which particularly aims to ask critical questions about the historical past, especially about the difficult past. And we bring the plethora of new approaches, methods, and critical questions about Soviet experience. Because Soviet experience is a complex experience with not only Georgia as a victim, but as a bystander or even participants, including with the famous Stalin, who was a Georgian. So this critical approach to the history was already successfully applied to the program. We have already 3 generations of students graduated from the program, and they are successfully continuing their work as a scholar in Germany and elsewhere, and in Georgia too. So this program is also going to kind of stop, and we are trying to save it somehow. And of course we will continue it in order to have this free public space, because without critical questions, without critical discussion about the past, we could not have the present and the future too, as an European country. Thank you
very much.